If you're a small California organization whose employees interact with the public, you are required to have an effective workplace violence prevention plan. In this piece, we're going to look at a post-incident response that California requires from employers if there is a workplace violence incident. And I'm going to talk about a really simple way to get most of that done through your required investigation process. Hey, my name is Mike Corwin, and I spent 30 years conducting investigations into violence. I was a civil plaintiff investigator building cases against organizations where violence took place. I conducted high-level internal investigations for businesses, nonprofit, and government agencies, and I even did criminal defense investigations. I saw firsthand how violence occurs and how it can be prevented. I then took that information that I learned and started working with organizations over 10 years ago, helping them to implement effective workplace violence prevention programs. Now, there's a lot of things that California requires from employers under its workplace violence prevention law. And if you're not sure that your workplace violence prevention plan is compliant with California law, will effectively keep your employees safer, and will reduce your risk, I can help you. Why not schedule a free 15-minute workplace violence compliance and safety audit? Together, we'll discuss your workplace violence prevention plan, where you're at, the types of trainings you've done, how you've done your assessment, your internal investigation processes, and I can point out a couple of quick wins for you that will allow you to implement some immediate improvements to your process. And if it looks like we'll be a good fit, together we can discuss whether a half-day in-house workshop will help you get your workplace violence prevention plan where you need it to be, or if you would like more assistance, a more done-for-you approach, we can talk about my 3-month implementation program to help you actually not just develop a plan, but implement it and maintain it. So just click on the link and schedule your 15-minute free workplace violence, compliance, and safety audit. Here's what California requires of employers post-incident. Now I'm going to read this first. I want to talk about how the majority of this can actually be accomplished through your investigation process. So you really can streamline, reduce the time it takes, and improve the effectiveness of this if you know how to incorporate it into your investigation process. Here's what California requires. Medical care to employees injured in an incident. 2, identifying all employees and other persons involved in the incident. 3, making trauma counseling available for any employees affected by an incident, and that doesn't just mean those attacked, but that can also mean those who witnessed it. 4, and these things are what we're really going to focus on today, post-incident debriefing. 5, identifying and evaluating any workplace violence hazards that contributed to the incident. 6, identifying and evaluating whether appropriate corrective action taken initially during your workplace violence prevention plan was effective. 7, soliciting from employees involved in the incident their observations regarding the cause of the incident and whether any measures could have prevented that incident. And 8, your violence incident log. Obviously, an investigation is not going to directly affect medical care or trauma counseling. So we're going to leave that for another point. So let's focus on those other avenues and how you can use the investigation process and in particular, your witness interview process in order to accomplish those and do those effectively as required by California. So let's start with the post-incident debriefing. Now, traditionally, when we think about debriefing, we think about getting everybody in a room and saying, hey guys, here's what's happened, now give me your feedback. But that's really not efficient, and that's not going to get you to the level of information you need to make it really effective. A better way to do that is during your investigation process when you're conducting interviews. Each and every person that's an employee that experienced the incident, whether as a participant or as a witness, needs to be interviewed. And as part of that, you can say to them, look, we need to go through this kind of like it's a debriefing. I need you to take me through everything that happened. I need to discuss what things led to that happening and how we can do better in terms of preventing it from happening. Now, what we're really talking about is the element of identifying and evaluating the safety hazards that contributed to the incident. Now, I'm going to say something here. We don't always understand before an incident happens what safety hazards our employees faced. So this is a really good way of identifying things that maybe we didn't anticipate. And I'll give you a really good example of that. Most people think that you can de-escalate before a violent attack actually occurs, but that's really not the case. Most violence occurs without warning. If it occurs without warning, you can't de-escalate it. So what we really need to do is use the interview process to identify how the violence happened, what triggered it, and maybe what types of interventions could have been done beforehand, or what types of trainings we need to work on in order to make sure that your employees are able to handle that type of situation when it arises. Now, as part of that process, when you're conducting your interviews, you want to look at what you put in place initially, see if it applies, and ask how effective those processes were. Now, look, the best laid plans of mice and men, you may have set up, you may have done a great assessment, you may have identified all the right safety hazards, you may even have put in place the best training for those safety hazards, but stuff happens. So this is a really good way of looking at what you put into place and assessing the effectiveness of it and thinking about, okay, we had a great concept here, but maybe we need to do a different type of training. Maybe we need to prepare our people to recognize that something is unfurling earlier than they were able to recognize it, and doing so, maybe that could have prevented this from happening. Now that goes to the next thing. We need to look at what types of measures would have prevented this from occurring or lessening the severity of it occurring. And again, your witness interviews are the best place to do that. And simply you can say to them, wide open general question, is there anything that we could do differently that you think could have prevented this from happening? Then you stop talking and let them talk. But again, you can see how that's part of your witness interview process. So all of these questions can be answered and can be taken care of in your single process, really streamlining it, making things much more efficient for you with the investigation process. Now, there's one other thing. California requires employers to maintain a violent incident log and to document whenever an incident occurs. They want you to get your information from the investigation that you conducted and also potentially from any police reports that there are. But the whole goal here is to identify all of the things we just talked about and to then use that data to figure out ways to improve your workplace violence prevention plan, your training, your prevention, because remember, this needs to be a living, breathing process rather than a static process where you prepare a plan and then shove it into a drawer. So you're going to take all of the information that you put together. Who was involved? What took place? What types of violent incident occurred? Was a weapon used? How did this unfurl? What types of safety hazards were this related to? What processes had we put in place? Why didn't these processes work? Put it all into your violence incident log, and then use that violent incident log to assess everything, to make those changes that will improve the process. If you're unsure that your workplace violence prevention plan complies with California law, that it's effective enough to keep your employees safe and will help reduce your regulatory and risk exposure, because remember, one of the things that can happen with workplace violence is you can be sued if a third party is injured or affected by an incident of workplace violence, even if you're otherwise covered under workers' comp. Schedule your free 15-minute workplace violence compliance and safety audit. Together, we'll look at your workplace violence prevention plan. We'll look at the different phases involved in your processes. We'll look at what you've implemented. We'll look at the trainings you've done to make sure that you are compliant. You'll walk away with this with a couple of tips that you can implement right away. And if you are a good fit, I'll discuss with you whether your organization would benefit from a one-and-done, half-day violence prevention workshop where we'll help you put together your plan, or if you would like more assistance and actually implement a plan in place, we can do a longer program. So just click on the link and set up your appointment now.